Oh, I don't know if it's that professional. This is all for fun. Or I guess the vocation, I just learnt that word. It means that you do something passionately and kind of like a job, but you don't get paid. I guess it's the modern day amateur.
Yeah. I love that. You know, I always wanted to ask you, your accent sounds unbelievably Australian. Is that because you were born here?
I grew up in Oz. So my family decided to move to Sydney in 1980. At the time I was 3 years old, and then we lived there for 5.5 years, came back in 85. And it only took like a year or something, and I started sounding really American. Like my cousin called me from Oz and she was like, oh my gosh, Linda, you sound so American. You got to do something about that. And I got really worried. And so since then I've just been a tad more mindful and tried to hold on to the accent because I love it. I mean, and I kind of feel like kind of feel like in Oz still, even though it was a long time ago.
Well, someone asked what brought you to Finland? I'm guessing it's that gorgeous husband of yours.
No, it's my family. They dragged me kicking and screaming.
Oh, that was
pretty
because
much.
You were here for 5.5 years and they dragged you back to Finland. Gotcha, makes more sense.
Yeah.
Why did I miss that? Oh, well, here you are back in Australia for the next hour or whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Whereabouts do you live in Sydney, by the way?
I do. Fun Guy says the accent sounds great on you. There you go. You got some fans. I live in Sydney in Sutherland.
Sutherland? I don't know that.
Yeah.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, it's the land of the South. We had some riots here once in Cronulla, and our saying is Sydney's fun, but Cronulla's a riot. That's our play on words for the day.
Horribly funny.
Yeah, I know.
How are you doing today?
I'm so excited to learn about. Oh, today? Yeah, I'm great. Yeah. I've been working on the thesis and I'm pedaling as we speak now, which is why my camera's shaking a bit. Because I'm on my exercise bike talking to you.
Oh, cool. Multitasking.
Yeah, that's right. They want you to say the dingo's got my baby. I'm going to say, I'm not going to say it.
I can't do it like Meryl. Nobody can do it like Meryl. Dingo's got my
Cell
baby.
block number 9. Oh, that's pretty awesome. You can take the girl out of Australia. I'll take Australia out of the...
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
We made a bit of a joke before you got online because you said, oh, sorry, I was late. My husband came home. And we said, hey, hey, hey. That's true love right there.
Okay.
Anyway. All right, I'm going to shut up now. So now we're talking about street epistemology, everybody, and I'm excited.
Oh, cool.
Let's learn.
Right. So street epistemology is this tool. As far as I know, this is like my hobby, and I started doing it like for reals since October, like studying it and trying to learn about it and what it is. And I started doing that in October because I watched some videos, or I came across some videos on YouTube that this guy, Anthony Magnamosco, had done, where he was just chatting like really nicely, really friendly to people about their deeply held beliefs. And some of it was like about karma, or that they are convinced that their dead relative is a cardinal, like a bird in the trees, and visiting them. Other stuff was, of course, God came up, and all kinds of like deeply held beliefs. And I just thought it was amazing how he could have these conversations, and throughout the whole thing, people were like happy. It was respectful. It was not combative in any way. And the best part was that I thought the people he was interacting with were thinking about it from a maybe new perspective, like thinking about it in the moment, as in, why do I believe this, and do I have good reason to believe whatever it is I believe?
Okay, so is he actually asking people to question why they believe in metaphysical, unfalsifiable arguments, or is he actually supportive of that? I missed that part.
He's questioning. So it's basically kind of like the Socratic method with some new stuff to it. But the idea is to facilitate an opportunity to reflect on deeply held beliefs in a way that one might not have done before. Because we take so many things as like obviously true, or maybe we just haven't questioned stuff in a while. So that's the idea.
Gotcha.
To reflect. That's my take on it. Like I said, I've just been doing this since October because I was really impressed because I've always been interested in how we know what we know and how some people can have such wildly different ideas about reality from other people, how they seem to be culturally influenced as well. I've found all these things to be really interesting, and I've also found that it's been really difficult to talk about it, that people are quite defensive of their beliefs and almost identify with some of their beliefs. And my objective has never been to attack anybody's sense of self or their identity. My wish has always been to just discuss it in a respectful and fun way. And it's always been a bit curious to me as to why is that so difficult. And through street epistemology, I'm finding that there is a way. Like I've witnessed it, and now that I'm studying it, I'm learning to do it myself.
That's awesome. What's his name? Dennis R. Hands, first of all, said no episting on the street, which I'm assuming is some
I love
intelligence that's over our joke. That's my kind of humor. And he also asked, what weird belief do you have? So I would phrase it, what beliefs do you have that you would love to discuss that perhaps maybe other people were unable to handle in the past without this newfound ability?
Well, you see, the whole thing with street epistemology is that we look at, so if somebody comes and does street epistemology on me, we will examine what I believe and why. And and I don't do street epistemology because I'm that interested in doing that, like with street epistemology, because I can't do it on myself. Although since I've learned this method, or it's method, it's a tool, I've had other people do street epistemology on me, and it is really, really fun. My beliefs, just to answer the question, because I don't want to evade the question, I guess I've come pretty close to that. I don't really, like, I know I can't know. Like that's something that I can actually test and verify. So there are more things that I don't really know than what I could be certain about. So when it comes to beliefs, I try to gauge my certainty about any phenomenon, anything in life, according to the available evidence, and my understanding of it also would have to be taken into account. So about beliefs, I guess my beliefs are also changing when I learn new stuff about the world. The beliefs that I like to investigate with other people is whatever it is they believe. I guess the conversations I find most kind of thrilling to myself are those where people at the beginning are very certain about something, and then they've just slightly opened that mind and go like, well, maybe I'm not 100% sure. Like that to me is a good talk, and it can be about anything. But of course, if they are beliefs that inform how people live their lives and maybe how they want to restrict other people's lives, those are the beliefs that I would think are critical to have a look at to see that we have good reasons to believe that they are true, if we indeed believe they are true.
Yeah, that's like a sort of a modern day version of skepticism.
Oh yeah, and it is. It's all about critical thinking. It does have the Socratic method in it. Yeah, defo.
Ooh. So have you ever found anyone you've come across as too intolerant to participate? in street epistemology yet?
Well,
or
it is.
getting way too defensive where the conversation can't continue?
The short answer to that is no, I haven't come across that yet, but it is always an invitation. I always invite people to have these conversations with me. Also, I do some street epistemology-ish type questioning when I Periscope, and then I don't necessarily start by saying, would you like to do some street epistemology with me? But I will, I will, I will check that, is it okay that I'm asking these many questions? Like, are you okay with me questioning? And if the person responds that, yeah, get off it. But also, I mean, if I'm doing this with somebody who is periscoping, they can always just ignore my questions, which has happened. But mostly street epistemology is fun, and people who come and do have conversations with me in my kitchen on my YouTube channel, they are always invited. They like to come back, and yeah, it's fun. I mean, I wasn't even really sure about that. Like, it's fun to watch, it's fun to learn. I think it's fun to do. I wasn't sure if it was fun to be kind of SE'd, as I'm, you know, within quotations. Yeah. But then I had a study friend, a guy who does street epistemology. He SE'd me, and it was so much fun because it helps me to reflect on what it is I think and how I express myself, and am I expressing myself adequately enough that the other person is understanding what I'm saying? Because that's also like a central point in street epistemology, is that the idea is for me to understand what the other person is saying, in fact. So there's no point in me questioning somebody about something that they believe if I don't understand what it is they are in fact believing.
Yes, yes. So it's sort of self-aware in two parts, I noticed. One is that it's aware that your belief is an assumption, and it's conscious of that. And the other one is that it does not automatically assume that one understands the meaning and intent behind what someone else actually says to them.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
And also
there's something. Yeah, sorry, keep going, please.
Oh, no, yeah, and that kind of, what would be the right word? That leads to me when I'm like, when I feel like I'm a good street epistemology, when I'm getting to somewhere with somebody, it is that I'm a good listener, that I am listening attentively, thoroughly to understand what the other person is saying. I'm relaying it back to them so they can hear what they said themselves. They can correct it if they then think it wasn't what they were meaning to say. So it's a really gentle way of opening up our beliefs, thoughts, opinions. It can also be political. It can be anything really that you can sit and talk about. But the great thing is also that it doesn't matter what I believe, what I think. The thing is to open up the other person's beliefs, so we're not being combative in any way. Yeah, it's kind of like a one-way street at a time, you know.
Yes, it's like you've opened a highway, and you know, it's not that you're trying to drive through a brick wall or someone's trying to shoot you down before you arrive. That's yeah, basically how the only way humanity is going to survive, pretty much, based upon what you're saying. Someone asked here, Alan G says you're a good facilitator, which I absolutely agree with.
Oh, cool.
And what is your scope name? Is it Love Moko?
It's Love Moko, yes. LOVEMOKK. Ooh. My name's Linda.
There you go. Linda Love Moko. I believe on YouTube you're called Super Curious.
Yes.
I love that name. Osley. Oh, I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry. Please go ahead. There it is, everyone. As you can see it, it's right there.
I've got a huge lag on my. Super Curious.
Yeah, there's a drop. Keeps freezing. Yeah, welcome to Sydney. This is where our national broadband is quite restricted once we get out of the continent. We've got massive superhighway internet inside Australia, but as soon as you reach the border to go international, it's choked off.
Oh, really?
So it's
why is that?
Yeah, so it looks like I have no idea how that works, but I'm assuming that's more of a government thing. where
Oh,
they physically have to upgrade, you know, between countries or outside of our country, however that works. That was as of a couple of years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if it hasn't changed that much. Dennis R. Hands want to know, and Ozlee asked a question too. Ozlee asked, why do we accept what we can't know? That sounds to me the opposite of what you do. Actually.
Yeah, but that's a good question. I mean, not that I would ever ask the question like that to somebody I'm working with, and they would have to be of the opinion that, or of the belief. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, but that is the question. Like, and what I do as a street epistemologist is that I try to focus on when we've uncovered the belief, like what it is, and I've understood what it is they believe, then we look at the reasons why, like how they've come to this belief. And then after that, we examine how, like, what's the epistemology? How did they come to believe that this is true, if they indeed believe it's true? And to determine the certainty of the belief, we also use like an arbitrary scale between 0 and 100 to communicate to myself how sure they are that this is true. So 0 is like I've all doubt, I'm not sure at all, and 100 would be I'm absolutely certain, like I cannot be wrong, and so on and so forth. And then we look at we try and figure out like how did they become so sure? What was the epistemology? Did they read a book? Did they look at evidence? Did they throw dice to conclude that this was true? Did they use faith? Like there are a lot of ways that we come to believe things, or to be like, to believe things. So we look at that, and then we just examine if that's a good reason. Could it be, and could we be mistaken about our belief? How would we know if we were wrong? And that's where falsifiability comes in. Is it a falsifiable belief? And if it isn't a falsifiable belief, is high level of confidence then a accurate place to be?
Well, I'm an extreme skeptic in that nature. We were just talking about this just before you came on. Someone said to me, do you actually believe strongly in anything? And I thought I'm going to talk about that afterwards, because in abstract mathematics you work on falsifiability, but I wanted to ask you on that point, would you mind explaining to our listeners what falsifiability is for anyone who may not know?
Oh, that's a great challenge, because this stuff is really new to me, and I think I've heard falsifiability, like I can't remember when I heard it the first time. I think I've always thought I've understood what it means, but now that I need to kind of really understand also how to figure out if I'm making a claim, falsifiability basically means, is it testable? Is there a way for me to identify if I'm wrong or mistaken, or if it isn't so?
No, that's dead on.
What I find challenging is, if you make a claim, then I would have to then, how do I figure out the test for it? So I do think it's kind of a challenge. No matter what the claim is or whatever the belief is, there is a challenge to figure out how to test it. But I think that's the great challenge, and that's a good exercise for anybody with anything that it is that we hold as true. Can we identify if we are wrong?
Can we identify if we are wrong? Exactly. And if we can't identify if we are wrong, then what's the solution in that case, when you have someone who still believes in what they believe?
Then I think, this is just like now my opinion, I can be wrong, that just to help people be aware that in fact is then just a belief, like an opinion, it's closer to a guess, and just be aware of that, and maybe not, defend it to the death. Maybe investigate a bit more to see if what it is we in fact believe about. I don't know. What do you say to that? Now I feel like I'm on shaky ground here, because I don't really know what to say about that. I went off there.
I would say, no, that's actually quite beautiful. But I would say that there's an assumption in there, which is that humans are rational actors.
Right.
And my concern, and someone else said the same thing, I think it was Osley, that some people's beliefs are by definition irrational, and sometimes that can be the same thing as metaphysical. And so the idea of falsification would just not be an option. And that comes not just necessarily religious belief, but it could be a politically held belief or a conspiracy theory. And I've seen people on my Periscope come on and just have these beliefs that you just can't shake. And my fear, I guess, is that if you're dealing with someone like that, your idea, which to me is exactly how we could behave ideally, seems to break down. That scares me.
But I think it breaks down because we then are talking about, like I said, opinions, guesses. We might be like using emotion. I just think it's good then to identify that is something that we need to hold on. There's a word for it, probably like maybe not be so sure about it. Is there a way we can keep an open mind on that issue because it's untestable?
Well, see, I don't know. The way you speak is what I would consider completely normal, but I've come to learn that it's actually not very rational. In fact, just as you were saying that, some lovely person came on and wrote in capitals that Jesus is all truth. I think he was quoting John 3:10, that I'm the way, truth, and the life. And I thought, wow, that's proof right there.
But then my question would be, how do we know that? How do we know that? How does this individual know that is so?
Yeah, you can't shake my belief. Yeah, true face is the same thing. You can't shake my belief. You know, there was once a person I was seeing sitting with Peter Hitchens, the brother of Christopher Hitchens, and Peter Hitchens is the Christian and Christopher Hitchens is not. Says Jesus saves, Moses invests. Someone said that was funny. And he actually said this. He said, how can non-believers look around and not see that God made this? And that is an unfalsifiable argument, exactly. And I guess my question, and Liran asked a similar question. He said, have you had a conversation where someone's perception has changed? My question would be slightly different to that. My question would be, could you have a conversation where someone like that has a perception that could be changed?
Well, I think it could be possible, but of course it depends on the person's willingness to, in fact, change their minds. If a person feels that they have the truth and there's no evidence that could come in, there's no new news that they could get that would alter their change their mind, then of course we're stuck. But I think the whole point of street epistemology is to introduce the idea that, well, if we got new evidence, is there anything that could get you to look at that belief, what you hold to be absolutely true? Is there anything that could nudge it? Is there, do you really think you know it all? I guess is what we're getting to. Although I wouldn't ask it like that, of course. But that's basically what we're trying to kind of get at. That introduce humility. That how can you know that you know all the possible information in the universe to the point that there is nothing that could be introduced that could change your mind at any point? Because I don't know. I'm an optimist in that I think that if people do that,
you are a gem.
skillfully enough, then maybe people would be willing to have a look at that. Has it happened in my conversations? I started practicing this kind of like in hard mode, talking to apologists, Christian apologists. I'm not convinced that I've changed anybody's mind. That hasn't really been my goal either. It is actually to talk to somebody who has a vastly concluded idea about reality that I fail to see the way they do, and see if we can have a constructive conversation on the topic. I think maybe people watching our conversations might then think of it at home and go like, yeah, I don't know if I would have answered like that. And I think maybe the honest answer would have been to some of the questions would have been that I don't know. And I think that's a win. So I'm not always just trying to change people's minds. I would like to facilitate good conversation and give people a place to think about what it is they believe, maybe from a new angle, in a new way. I just think that's really healthy.
The problem with talking with someone like Love Moko is that we actually agree, and that always makes it hard because I don't even know what the challenge are on. But other people are doing a great job. Someone asked, how about people who have died and returned? Well, firstly, no one has come back from brain death. They've come back from body death, but not brain death as far as we know, except for unverified stuff. And even if that were true, it does not prove that Jesus was born of a virgin, and that has anything to do with you living after death. Next question. Oh, Chris said that Leonardo DiCaprio made a movie about that. Let us know the movie. Tweet it to an artist, Chris. And there were 2 more questions for you. Man, I've never had this many questions for someone I'm talking to. Do you believe in free will? From Dennis Hands asked that question.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Dennis. I knew you would come with the really good ones. I have to say, I don't know. And that's my true and honest answer at this point. I actually have been slightly obsessed with this YouTuber called Cosmic Skeptic, and he did a really nice argument against free will that I've watched several times because I honestly really don't get it. I think I have a sensation that I'm kind of making choices and stuff, but I also realize that that those choices come from a long line of like reasons that I am not in control of, like where I was born, what my genetic makeup is for my brain to be in a certain way and all that. And then I think ultimately for me, the biggest problem is what is the I that would have the will to be free? I don't know is my short answer to that. I think it's really fascinating. I think it's quite interesting. Like, how could I even have this experience that I think that I'm choosing is kind of like really interesting when you start thinking about it. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's awesome. According to neurologists, apparently, which I heard from Dr. Sam Harris, is that consciousness is not localized to one specific point in the brain. I don't know if you've heard the same thing.
Yeah, I've heard similar stuff, and then also that apparently when we get the sensation that we're making the choice or making that, having that will, that it actually, that sensation happens slightly after something in the brain happens that would indicate that we have actually made the choice.
Yes, that's right, where it happens before we're consciously aware of it,
and so if I'm identifying that my will is in that conscious feeling of me making the choice, then at least I think I'm highly mistaken there. But then maybe there's me that's the subconscious, and it's like, but it's bizarre because isn't the whole me thinking that I'm now deciding to lift this post-it note for no apparent reason? Like, if I'm thinking I'm going to do that at that point, but something did it slightly before, I don't know. Yeah, it gets really complicated and interesting.
Yeah, someone said someone's arguing about someone being dead for 15 minutes. Not brain dead. I've never heard of anyone being dead, but I'm always open to that. If there's evidence of someone actually being brain dead with the spark being able to be reignited, definitely tweet it forth to an artist, and I'll copy Love Moko. You can tweet it to Love Moko as well on Twitter. LOVEMOKKO. That's right, isn't it? At Love Moko.
At Love Moko. Yes.
Ah, awesome. Justify what they believe. I don't know what Chris in Washington talks about atheists believing. I don't know what atheists particularly believe. Each individual atheist may or may not have a belief, and not even be aware that they do have a belief, or that their opinion is a belief. So I don't think it's a uniform thing to discuss on. But it's a good point. What else? Liran asked, where is he? Is reality in any way knowable, or are our lives just making a leap basically in the dark?
Leap in the dark. Well, that's all. That's also really interesting. Again, I always have to do it because I think it's the intellectually honest place to be, is that I really don't know. But what I do find interesting is that there seems to be things that we can agree upon, like through the scientific method, it does seem that we do get reliable results that we can do over and over again that tell us something about this world that we're living in. Now, of course, we're taking in all of that data through our senses, and I know I can go like a bit off with those, and they can be misleading and all that. But that's why I think the scientific method is so great, because we need to do that in group. We need to have like peer review, other people doing these experiments in order to see if we, in fact, are getting the same results. And it's kind of like a team effort to do, to investigate the world. Reality, I think, is kind of like a complicated, loaded word. I would rather talk about just the world. What is? That's what I would have to assume, that there is something that I'm living in. But I think I also have like a mental reality that is different from other people's, because, you know, my thoughts get in there and they muddle stuff up. But I think there's a difference between perception and that can be different for other people. But I am of the opinion that there is one physical reality that we share. That's my assumption.
Finally, we found a point where we disagree. Awesome.
Oh, cool.
You heard it here, guys. My friend Linda and I finally disagree on something. Osley had a good question, and I so wanted to ask this before. Does it stress you knowing that you can't know certain things?
No, not really. And I think that's also interesting, because through doing SE, I found that can be a stressful point for my fellow humans.
Yes.
So I'm looking into why that is, in order to be more empathetic towards it. But for me, I actually find it quite, it feels honest to say that I don't know what I don't know. Yep. I feel rather, I tense up when I notice that I'm talking about stuff that I feel like I'm kind of making it up. That gives me more stress than admitting I don't know, and also the I don't know continues the investigation.
I remember seeing Bill Nye once, and my opinion of him is, 50%. He's lovely and he's got his flaws. But he was talking to, I think his name was Ken Ham or Kevin Ham, this Australian guy in America who did some Christian thing. And there was a couple of questions where they asked him and he said, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Ham said, well, I do know, and it's in this book. And I just thought to myself, exactly what you're saying, that some people, number one, feel the need to know, and number two, they feel that what counts as proof is one particular revelatory method via a particular book. And I don't know if you think that that's something that can be changed, whether they have the free will to even consider what you're saying, whether that's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. When you bring free will into that, it does get really, really interesting. Like, I've been thinking about what it is I'm actually trying to do here, if we're all kind of like just grooving on and can't really affect it all too much. But is that the consequence? I don't know. Yeah. Well, to answer your question, I think that once Ken Ham, for example, if he would get sufficient evidence to rock his ark, so to speak, I think he would change his mind. But of course, that's because that's how I think. I think it's because the thing is, when you say know for sure and absolutely, that's when you stop learning. That's when you're saying that there's nothing more to know. I just think giving how ignorant we are and continuously prove ourselves to be, that's I don't understand how people get to that point where they go, this is it, I've got it, there's nothing more to this story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Chris just brought up something in sync with what you're saying, or half along the lines of what you're saying. He said that for some people who believe in that particular book, it's as solid to them as mathematics is to me. And I wanted to say that actually science is the idea of science is that you can always be proven wrong with anything that you're learning. And it's not possible that it's to be complete, but that itself is an assumption.
Sure, yeah. But I was still like, if you've got it all, I would like to have really good evidence to prove and reason to prove that is so. That there is no way that person then can be a mistake, and it would have to be like, really, really, really convincing. And
Yeah.
And what was I thinking? Isn't also math? Could you answer this to me, Gab? Isn't math more like with the comparison of the book and math? Isn't math more like the language with which the tool? Like science is also a tool. It's not a set body of knowledge or a set dogmatic idea. But science is a tool, a method, a verb.
That's exactly right.
It's the language,
that's
also
exactly
a tool to investigate.
Well, no, that's a beautiful question. Mathematics is a combination of applied and pure is the tool, and pure is the alphabet we use to create so that we can even, form the language tool in the first place. The biggest difference between the book and mathematics, number one, I don't believe in mathematics. The idea of belief is nonsensical to my mind. What happens in mathematics is that people make a conjecture, which is they think something could be true. And they also think of exactly what Love Moko was saying, a way that it can be falsified. And if it is falsified, then it's falsified. The difference is with the book is that it can never be falsified, even though it's obviously falsified literally. Then it becomes, oh no, that's not how it's meant to be read. It's meant to be read in other circles. And for that reason, that makes complete sense as to why one particular book can bring forth so many different denominations, most of whom think everyone else who interprets the same book is interpreting it incorrectly.
Yeah, and that to me is like hugely problematic because
yes, it is problematic. But the question is, see, you were saying that you think that with Ken Ham that if you gave him enough evidence, he could change his mind, and I would say I disagree with that completely.
Right. Like he set his mind and there's nothing that could I don't know. I think even Ken Ham would have to but because his belief is unfalsifiable, but do you think he understands falsifiability? Like really understands it? I'm not trying to be like
no. I mean, I don't know what he understands, but it seems to me that if it's not in the book, he's going to say that was something invented by the devil, or this is we're relying on the human mind, not on God's mind.
So there would always be like a shifting of the goalpost, and like this is what I would.
It's always a shifting of the goalpost, and it doesn't just happen with religion. I see it happen with politics, and you'll see, for example, that no matter what Trump does, the radical left will say, I told you he was racist the whole time. And the radical right will say, well, the radical right would say the same thing. But the regular Trump supporter might say, no, you're misinterpreting his views. And that's not even religion. And yet with an overwhelming amount of evidence, you have geniuses like Peter Thiel who still support Trump. And then you have people like Sam Harris who's openly said he'd rather vote for Hillary Clinton on life support than for Trump himself. And I just think to myself, well, with this overwhelming amount of evidence, it seems to me that more complex an issue is, the more humans revert to their natural temperament and bias and form a conclusion based upon that, as opposed to the evidence. I would love for you to be correct, and I hope that you're correct. I just don't see it so far, and if you can tell me where, mate, I am in.
Yeah, well, of course I don't know, and I just think this is like the most fun way. I'm talking about street epistemology now, just the most fun way to even attempt to kind of enlighten people about how they have arrived at the beliefs they have, because I think so many might not have reflected on it, and of no fault of their own, just that I don't think really have. It's been so, at least when I was a kid, it was like, you don't talk about religion like that. It's a subject that you set aside, and it's always like, well, when you come home for a family dinner, you don't talk religion, you don't talk politics, you don't talk about these things. I think that kind of stagnates us. So I'm asking, like, why is that? And these are sometimes the most important things that really influence how and why we do things in the world, and what we think other people should do. And so I think those are the crucial things for us to think of and talk about. Yeah. So
Ruby says she loves you and it's a great scope, and
cool.
Alan said the same thing. And I think, it's so refreshing to have such a polite, articulate human being. My God, it gives me hope for the world. Ginny Lee said, daily blessings are proof of God. I would say daily curses would have to be factored into daily blessings before one makes that assumption. That's just my response. I'm not saying that's correct, of course. Boss Briggs wanted to know if you could provide an example of street epistemology.
Well, I think the thing with street epistemology is also that it's kind of a slow method. It takes quite a bit of patience. So for us to do it right here, right now, it will probably be quite slow, quite unentertaining. And also I think that we think pretty much the same. And I think it's actually quite a scary prospect to do SE on Gab. Just because, why do I think that's scary? Well, I think we think so alike, and I don't know, should we try? Now, when I started thinking about it, it was like, do you have a belief, Gab, you would like to investigate? I'll give it a shot. But yeah, if you want to see really good SC by people who have done it a longer time, go on YouTube and look up Anthony Magnabosco is probably one of the best. Sorry, I stumbled on that. Anthony Magnabosco. He's been doing it for over 5 years, and he's got really good examples on YouTube.
Yeah. So guys, don't worry about it. Pick a fake person. You can tweet it to Anortis later, and then everyone can see your Twitter handle and then that guy's name, Anthony Magnabosco.
Okay, I'll do that. And also, I encourage anybody who thought that this sounded like fun and an interesting way to engage with other people and to think about deeply held beliefs and maybe challenge their own deeply held beliefs. Then I encourage everybody to kind of look into SC and also to learn SC and maybe try it. Like, you don't have to do it doing like videos like Anthony does or on a YouTube channel like I do. You can just do it with your friends really organically, strike up conversations with the type of questioning that is done in SE. And it's for me, it has been like a really cool asset to my life, where I feel I'm a better person because of it. And I have better conversations with people that I love that view the world differently from how I do. And I think that's the best thing about it. So I encourage everybody to go out and have a look at it, learn it if you want to, and because it's, good stuff. I think it's really impressive the way it works.
You heard it here first, everyone. Osley wanted to know, Tom Chatterley said the difference in a blessing and a curse is subjective. I said, yeah, I'll give you that one, Tom. I think you're on the money there. Osley wanted to know what is the difference between ideology and religion in terms of the fact that some people will just stand their ground on a particular belief.
Is that question for me? I don't know that there is too much of a difference, other than I guess we ideology, I guess religion always implies a supernatural creator being introduced to it, although not in Buddhism all the time, depending on who's talking about it. I have heard of these like where it's more like a philosophy, and Buddha isn't considered a divine being. And I say divine even though I don't really know what that means, really. But ideologies, yeah, I think people can get, yeah, I don't know that there is a big difference there. And I think ideologies are also something we can investigate using street epistemology, to also have a look at it. Do we have a good reason to hold to those ideologies? Are they always going, are they absolute in all situations and stuff like that? Just kind of open it up. Yeah.
I remember that you were disagreeing with me on my scope when I was suggesting that it wasn't Islam that was occupying Europe increasingly. It was the fact that Europe itself lost its meaning for its own existence, and so any stronger belief system that exists outside would naturally flow in and become much more dominant. What are your thoughts on that? This is street epistemology, guys, in action.
I can't remember that I disagreed on that. I thought I should have said like what it was specifically I disagreed upon. I think I was disagreeing on how you spoke about atheism and it being, I can't actually remember anymore. I'm sorry. I could go look back on it. If I look at it again, I know I probably will know what it was about. But it was something about the use of the term, the label atheism, that I disagreed with.
Oh, yes. Well, I was saying, by the way, everyone who's listening, the person who openly admits that they don't know certain things, to me, is the one who I hold in the highest esteem in general. Not everyone might think that way. I don't know. I remember I said I don't know to a lady once, and she said, she really looked down on me after that, which was interesting. But I was saying that atheism is lack of content. It's not an actual dogma. Yeah. It's the lack of a belief system itself, and you can fill that with other things that sometimes religionists conflate with atheism, such as Stalinism and Trotskyism. Yeah.
Okay, I think I disagreed with the thing that you can fill it with something. I just think by definition you can't really fill it with anything, that it's purely a response to the existence of theism.
Yep.
How I think of it.
Okay.
But I guess that's just semantics at that point. So.
Yeah. No, it's good. Well, I'm glad we can clarify. What would be your definition of atheism as you understand it?
I look at it as a label for somebody who does not believe in a God.
Okay.
Who has no God belief. And it doesn't really exist without there being theists to... Because atheists don't create the notion of a God. Theists create the notion of a God. And so atheists are just saying, but I don't believe what you're proposing. So therefore, I believe if we did not have theists, there would be no atheists. This is also commonly commented on by believers, that atheists are so silly because they, sometimes they don't, how can they not believe or in this thing that they don't believe? And that's the whole thing. It's just that I'm not accepting what you're proposing. And that...
that's right.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
If the God hypothesis would be kind of like a thing of because I can't say for sure that there absolutely is no God. So my honest answer also to the problem is that I just don't know. And I think that also makes me an atheist, because there are theists who claim that they know, they have the knowledge of that.
Well, I think a lot of times, a lot of people, miscategorize atheism as being anti-theistic, in the sense that the belief is that there is no God, and that's not what atheism is at all. What people define as agnosticism is what. Actually, someone wanted to ask you, what is the difference in your mind between atheism and agnosticism?
Well, I've understood that they talk about different things. That atheism is about belief. So what I believe about this God proposition, and then and agnosticism is what I know, what I claim to know. So I would also say I'm an agnostic atheist, as in I don't have knowledge about this. And I think also the atheist label for me comes about the moment I say that I don't know whether a God exists or not. That kind of like makes me an atheist, even though that points to what I believe or lack a belief in.
Yeah. I wanted to add to that Ginny, does that make sense? She said that she'll pray for you anyway, which I think is very sweet.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to add to that I would say there's a difference between being a deist and a theist. And a deist, one cannot rule out the idea of a prime mover in the sense that, maybe someone kicked off whatever it is that started, even though there's no evidence for that. A theist is one step further. That is where you know a specific God, you know its mind, and you know exactly what it wants for you. And only if everyone were to make, the correct appreciations, then of course they would be accepted into some sort of divine, eternal club.
I've also heard it explained like in a slightly different way, that all deists are theists, but all theists aren't deists, kind of thing. That you're a theist at the moment you believe in a supreme being kind of thing, in a God, and then they're like sub thingies. A deist would be someone who thinks it's not personal, that it's the kickoff thing. Was that right?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on how you see it in your mind, kind of.
Yeah, no, this is great.
The words.
Yeah, I don't. That's so awesome. Now, did you have any intention of how you wanted this to go? I'm really sorry. I feel like it's
not
like
really.
me asking.
I was like, let's just go on and let's see what happens. And I really enjoy your scope, so I was like really glad to come and do a conversation. Then I just thought that the only thing that I thought that would kind of like, touch on what I've understood to be our common interests would be street epistemology, because you're like, I don't have a formal education from anything, or I'm not really anybody like with any huge.
Oh, don't be silly! I would not have picked that at all. And it's actually funny. People think that if someone has a degree that they're smart, and I'm like, no, you can be smart and not get a degree, or you could be smart and have gotten a degree. Yeah. Sometimes you can be a dumbass and paid enough money to get a degree too.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that, but I also feel like, I don't know, that's one of my, I guess,
it's harder for human beings in general to actually categorize people without deferring, which was the word I couldn't think of in my last scope, deferring to an institution which officially recognizes you as intelligent. And that's where university comes in, because you can tell people, hey, I'm doing a postgraduate in quantum mechanics, and then, oh, wow, he's smart. So you don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of trying to prove, basically getting to know someone so that they know you well enough to know that, holy crap, yeah, you are actually quite an amazing thinker, which I find you to be. That was, to me, that was obvious from the first few scopes because of the way you asked certain questions.
Oh, cool.
But you're right.
That's nice. And I guess what I personally think that I have value, like what I can bring to the table to humanity, would be just an eagerness to learn and to ask and question, which is what I get to do within this kind of framework of street epistemology, where I have then like street epistemology friends, and we get together and we learn and we share ideas. So it's a really fun way of just putting the stuff that I really like to do into kind of like a context where we can do stuff together and maybe get somewhere with it.
I had a question for you. Do you believe that if someone had the exact same facts as you, that they would inevitably come to the same conclusion?
Same facts.
Oh, actually, before you answer that, I was not recording. I'm sorry, I was not recording that question. For everyone on the podcast, I have to annoy Love Moko and everyone here on Periscope by asking the same question. Do you believe, Love Moko, that if someone had the same facts as you, that they would inevitably arrive at the same conclusion?
I think that's a super interesting question, and I think that there would be possibly that might be true if the other kind of faculties and things that factor in when people come to conclusions are at play. Like I said, like where I'm born, my genes, my kind of brain, how much alcohol I've had in my life that has, dumbed down certain parts of my brain, and whatever things that have affected me to draw certain conclusions from certain facts. So I would say, I don't know, again, but I think it could be possible. But I think the other things that factor in than just having like what we consider to be facts.
Yep. Okay. What things in your mind would you say are separate to facts? Apart from, you mentioned genetics, you mentioned lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
absolutely. I would agree with that. I'd say temperament, all of that is. So see, there's a difference, because you were talking about we have 5 senses. I would say that there's a difference between what there is to observe and the method via which we observe it. That people's temperaments can grossly affect, in my mind at least, how one interprets the same information coming through the same 5 senses.
What was the thing that could affect it? Sorry, I was just thinking of something else.
That's all right. No,
just
it's probably cut out there. I would say that the people's temperaments can grossly affect the way that they're processing the same information coming into their brain via the same senses. I
totally agree on that. Yeah. And also, I think it's. I probably, this is me like just thinking. I don't have this information as any type of fact, but I'm immediately thinking just about that those temperaments would have like they have evolutionary kind of a trail, but like that some people, when like if you have a certain trait in your brain, a certain temperament to understand information a certain way, then that will make you do things in a certain way and come to certain conclusions that are then beneficial or have been beneficial for your ancestors.
All of this negates free will for everyone listening, and Paint Something Says She Loves You.
So that's so cool. But so how do you solve the problem then, Gab, of how to, or does this affect then how I should kind of like view the meaning of me having an attitude towards my life and how I do things? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I would say that, sorry, I cut you off again. I'm so sorry.
No. Just please continue. I was going to repeat the same thing, I think, kind of.
I don't necessarily see any evidence for you choosing to have an open mind as you do. I would attribute much more of it, if not all of it, if possible, to everything that preceded your existence and your genetics, your environment. I would say we live in a universe of causality. And so we can trace every single thing back to what caused the consequence. So the action and consequence are intertwined, and so they're linked all the way back to inception of the universe. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know if that's true, but I just don't see any other way that how could you randomly decide that you want to be open-minded and someone else doesn't? It bothered me from a very young age, and I love your kitty too.
Yeah, Sylvia wanted to obviously come and say something. Yeah, I get that. And I think I kind of like agree, like I believe something similar to that so far. But then I'm like wondering, because I feel like if I prompt myself to want to, I don't know, be more productive, say next week, like really like localized kind of like affecting my everyday life with how I think or my attitude. How much weight should I put on that if I'm still going to do whatever? Do you know what I mean there? Oh, I'm not expressing my question too well. Maybe I haven't formed it too clearly in my own mind.
No, this is the beauty, everyone who's listening, of talking. I think talking is what clarifies what is in our mind, just circling around like a random hurricane. and speaking it refines it, absolutely. And I think Periscope helped me a lot with that, and this conversation helps once again. So,
oh yeah, me too, by the way. Periscope has been like brilliant. Just also to
yes.
like watching replays and going like, oh yeah, so that's what I think. And also like
that's awesome. Oh man. So that's why some people might say chooses to be animals or psychopaths or anything. I don't see evidence for that en masse, especially after living in the Middle East, where God is as real as water, basically, in the Middle East. On every street corner, you're going to see something relating to some sort of religious event for one particular type of religion. And if you don't act in the same way, then you are not accepted in that community. But without getting too broad, ISIS, as well as other people who I say 100% convinced of a certain ideology, are not into negotiation. They absolutely believe, and I've read two of their magazines. I actually read them live on Periscope. They had a monthly magazine, and I read some of that. Actually, I read one of them was where they announced that they would be actually performing an attack on Egypt, on the Egypt Coptics, and that the week later that actually happened. So they're not holding back their actual beliefs. And it seems to me that how does one negotiate with that, besides at the moment what's happening in the Middle East, which is that you'll get a dictator who tries to shut off that section so that everyone else can breathe. How would you find a way to have a discussion with them? Is there free will there? Is there any evidence that could sway them?
Such a huge, wonderful question. Yeah. Well, first of all, I would have to say that I would need to like go on a super research of what the situation is, what people really believe, how that kind of social structure works, how the dominance works, how the kind of law works and all that. And after that huge research session, I guess, given that I could sit down and talk with people who are in position of influence, well, I guess I am expressing something akin to, well, we'll sit and talk about it. And and would they listen to me as a woman? Yeah, I don't know. So maybe so I don't know if even I would get that far. That seems like kind of a big fantasy idea I've got going there. So I'm thinking, again, it's about education for everybody. Education, children, women. Wait for the generations to move. Education, new ideas, information.
Mr. Schmitzer said a good thing. He said their logic to tweet me. Oh, tweet me again, my dear Michelle Lemmy. Mr. Schmitzer said that if you follow logic based upon their initial assumptions or their premise, you'll come to the same conclusion. I have read, quite a few of their texts, as well as the Quran, of course, in Arabic that they, claim to ascribe to, and I don't see them following logic at a fundamental level in certain topics. What I would see is they do criticize Christianity quite well. What they do is they use the same reasons that American Christians use for the existence of God to prove their God. And it's a very similar style of unfalsifiable thinking. And if I am right, I hope I'm not, but if I am, it scares me that Europe is not focusing on that enough. It's not enough of a topic. That does concern me, because it allows, let's say, religious right in Europe to then think that the problem is the whole religion as opposed to one specific subsect or one specific sub-ideology. And so it furthers the division between then native Europeans who will then fight amongst themselves between whether or not, you know, demographic shifts are reasonable.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happens. Wow.
Tweet that to me, Mr. Schmitzo. Peter Hitchens. I've almost everything Peter Hitchens has ever said. I wanted to ask you, actually, you were saying that Nordic, I think you were saying that there was a difference between Nordic countries and Europe in terms of culture.
Yeah. Yes.
You'll have to teach. I know almost nothing about Nordic cultures except that they seem to be the happiest places to live.
Well, I guess what I was thinking about is that, yeah, we have this thing called the Nordic ministries, and there is a lot of like Nordic cooperation being done between the nations, where it's funny because they're still like, I mean, Finland has a state church. I think Norway just did away with theirs. I'm not sure about Iceland anymore, but still, I've understood that there is a lot of contemplating being done in the governments of all the Nordic countries that has to do with value systems and how we want our values to be reflected in our society, and that one of the big value things is, of course, equality, men, women, all people. I mean, the whole concept of the welfare state comes from, like, if you can't know where you're going to wind up in your society or where you're going to be born, it has to be good for everybody. And that it is the responsibility of everyone in society to take care of everybody in society and make it work, which is also, I mean, criticized in the Nordic country because it makes for a quite a slow, like there's things progress slowly but surely. So there's so instead of these like quick spurts of maybe progress in a certain area or in economy are hindered by this kind of system that we have. Now I'm talking in quite broad terms, and I'm not an economist, so I don't really want to say too much, but what I've understood, for example, compared to the American style, it's like our like when you look back quite far, our economy will you know, grow slowly, and the American is designed to kind of go really fast.
Yeah, but at the price of poverty, is that what I understand there? Or?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, like they're rising faster, but that is at the price of not all their citizens living above the poverty line? Or some of them having a lower standard of living that they, whereas in, you know, in the Nordic countries, maybe the safety net allows maybe slower economic growth, but a better average lifestyle.
Something like that. And fact check everybody, because I'm probably getting half of this wrong. But what I've understood is with the American system, it's like there are these spikes of like great economic growth and then like crashes and spikes and crashes, and it's kind of designed that way. And also this disparity between rich and poor becomes quite increases all the time due to this system. The Nordic systems take into account kind of like a slow growth where we try to minimize the disparity between rich and poor by heavy taxation on the rich or those who make more money. That's all I had to say about that. But anyway, I think that's very unique when you look at Europe. It's kind of unique the way the Nordic countries handle their politics and kind of like these value systems in that. And also that I've understood that it's secular, the value systems that are discussed and kind of developed for the countries to move forward in a peaceful way in the world as wholesome societies, are based on like scientific study, what actually is good for people, what is actually good for people when they commit crime, what is good for society, and for that person, do they need punishment or do they need rehabilitation, and things like that. So it's always being revised and looked at I think, more than I understand in other countries. I could be really wrong here. There's probably other countries that do that a lot too. I guess all countries want to improve their way of doing things, but
well,
no, I'm going
Mr.
off
Schmidt,
again.
Sorry. I hope that I'm not keeping you from your lunch or anything like that.
No, but I could begin to wrap it up, because I know I'm getting a bit fuzzy in my mind. I'm good for like an hour or something of thinking and talking, and then I kind of go, yeah, I don't know what I was talking about just there. But look into the Nordic ministries and the Nordic way of life. I think there's good stuff there that can be maybe looked at by the rest of the world, just as the Nordic countries can also learn marvelous things from other places in the world. And it's kind of great that we've got different societies that are doing different things with different approaches, because maybe then on a global scale, when we look at it, we can learn vastly different things that maybe then, when combined or used together, could then get us even further than if everybody did everything the same way, kind of like science.
There were other questions which we won't have time for. Things like, what's the definition of good and wholesome that you mentioned earlier, but we can always look at them some other time. Once
give me that question. I got really curious about it. I can take the last question. What was it?
What you were mentioning, that the focus in Finland can be in your mind, about what is good and wholesome for the society. Does the society itself have a definition of what is good and what is wholesome?
I think that's constantly kind of revised, because we were actually quite late with equality, like marriage equality. And of course, the church kind of kept their influence on that. But I mean, that's just one example of where it is revisited, and we know too much to say that marriage inequality would be good for everybody in our society, because we now know and understand that homosexuality is alive and well, and also isn't anything that requires a moral judgment to it. It's not a moral question. So then the moral question is, should all people have the right to marry whoever they want to when it's consented and adult and all that? I mean, these are, after all, when we look at just from the state perspective, it's just two people making a contract between each other of how to kind of secure each other's economic, I guess, and kind of rights with each other and stuff like that. I mean, for myself, I always thought that the main point with me getting married to my husband was just that I wanted all the rights that I could have, and that he could have the same if something happened to either of us, like in a hospital or something, that we're considered family, that we have immediate kind of we're like a family. That was the whole idea. But now I'm going off again.
We could go on for ages, honestly. The last question is, Mr. Smith would like to know, is it cold in Finland today?
Is it cold? No, it's like 20. I think it's about 20 degrees, maybe plus in the sun, and that's like hot if we, relative to Finland. I think it's like, it's steaming hot. Oh, but could I just add to the whole wholesome thing? Because I started by saying that actually we were really late with the marriage equality. But what I kind of like mean is that the Finnish or the Nordic countries do revise these things constantly. I think the whole marriage equality thing was something that was inconvenient to look at, but there are other things that are considered to be important always, and it has a lot to do with education and children and equality and these things that are constantly being like revised, looked at again with with more what's the word? When you just have more experience, more knowledge, more scientific data to back up how children are actually happy and wholesome and live well. Like, we kind of thought that something was the case in the 70s, and then we learnt more in the 80s and 90s, and we tried different things, and then changes. And the idea is always to look forward and look for a better way of doing things, and a better way of learning, a better way of integrating, a better way of living life. It's not that these things have been decided upon at one time and they will never change. I think that's the thing with the Nordic countries. It's a progressive mentality.
Well, that would be deontology and Immanuel Kant's position, but that's a whole other topic.
Okay. And I just want to put a little disclaimer that these are my opinions, and I have not researched the Nordic countries versus other societies. These are like stuff that I pick up and opinions that I have. So take it with a grain of Finnish salt.
Someone says give children chocolate, that'll make them happy. That was Schmitzer. Well, guys, love Moko. Don't forget to tune into her. She is super curious on YouTube. To be continued, absolutely, as long as Love Moko, whenever she's ready. This was an easy. I love having my other guests, but you're very easy to talk to. I think it's very obvious that you're non-judgmental and you just say what you think, and you have no intention of forcing that opinion on anyone. It's such a pleasure. If the world was like that, seriously, have almost any problems I can imagine.
And
everyone saying thank you.
And I love being here, and it was really nice talking to you.
Oh, it was awesome. Do you want to give a shout out to people on your addresses and for our podcast channel and stuff?
I guess I did my shout outs to Anthony Magnabosco. If you're interested in street epistemology, he is a great resource to look at, because he's been doing it for 5 years, and he's got great examples of it. Also, I just would like to put in there that street epistemology looks different. It's got different styles. People are experimenting and doing different things. So, look around, have a look-see, and take what you like from it. And that's all I would like to say about that.
Well, everyone, you can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send to patreon.com/gabsmacked, GABSMACKED. It'll also be on Twitter and Autist, ANAUTIST. And Linda will shoot through her address to our Twitter too, and I'll retweet it. And it's also going to it'll go there as well. And then also on my YouTube and your YouTube. Super curious.
Cool. Yeah, I'll probably do an editing thing, because I just recorded this. But I'll probably edit it, because I was thinking with the Periscope and everything, it could be difficult to follow from my YouTube. But I'll edit it and put it up and let you know when that happens. Oh, and I'm also doing on Super Curious, I'm going to do a kind of like a fun learning SE series, because I had this great conversation with a scientist called Dr. Tyrone Wells, who is now a new brand spanking new street epistemologist. And we had like so much fun, and I thought I would make like 10-minute videos about that. So if you're interested, there will be learning SE on my channel too.
Oh, very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was an honor, and I look forward to more talks in the future.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me, Gab, and have a really nice day. And thank you.
Oh, you too. Bye-bye. All the best.
Okay. Catch you later. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.